That is Michael Sebastian on the piano playing our tune, Simple Gifts, the old shaker tune. We normally broadcast the version embedded in Aaron Copland's symphony, Appalachian Spring, but this is better. Welcome to the Meeting House, Michael.
Good to be here.
It's nice to have the piano here today. It's nice to have you on the keyboard. Welcome to all of you. I am Dwight A. Moody, your host for Conversation on Religion and American Life. But first, let me tell you something. I went to church 3 times this past Monday. I turned on my computer and watched services of worship at Providence Baptist in Hendersonville, North Carolina, Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky, and St. Peter's by the Sea Episcopal Church in Gulfport. Providence is where I pastor and preach and worship and where Michael plays the piano. I watch the recording of our service each week because years ago, the great K. Wood Ledford suggested it might be a good thing. He didn't say it quite like that, but what he said was something like this, quote, "After every Kentucky basketball game, I listen to the recording of my play-by-play commentary. I want to catch my mistakes, practice my pronunciations, and polish both the substance and style of my delivery," end quote. K. Wood died in 2001, not quite a decade after 39 years behind the microphone in Memorial Coliseum and Rupp Arena. So in his honor, and for the good of my congregation, I try to improve my own delivery, welcoming the people, lifting our concerns up in prayer, reading the scriptures, and of course, preaching the gospel. It's important that we ministers do it well so as to comfort or confront our people and also to gain a hearing for the good news of Jesus. After that service and before lunch, I tuned into Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. It's one of the largest congregations in the United States, whereas mine is one of the smallest. The lead pastor there, Kyle Idleman, was preaching for the first time in 3 months. He took the microphone and talked about what he called his sabbatical, but what most of us would call a suspension. Last summer, the elders of the church challenged his leadership and questioned some of his decisions. Idleman pushed back, it seems, and they responded with some version of, "We think you need some time off." I follow all this because I have family in the church and on the staff. And Kyle Idleman was, at my invitation, a plenary preacher for the inaugural Festival of Young Preachers in 2010. So what does such a high-profile pastor think, feel, and say after such a public reprimand? I wanted to know, and so did a lot of other people. So I watched, listened, made some notes, but mostly I confess that I don't know nearly as much as I wish. After lunch, I opened the website of St. Peter's down on the Gulf Coast. What made the service appeal to me was the title, Fish and Whistle, a John Prine Mass. It was held early on Saturday evening, August 20th, just a few months ago. The pastor is not a recent convert to John Prine like I am, so he knew all the words to both the Episcopal liturgy and the John Prine songs, such as Fish and Whistle, Angel from Montgomery, In Spite of Ourselves, Please Don't Bury Me Down in the Cold, Cold Ground. We're going to play that in a few minutes. And of course, Spanish Pipe Dream. We're going to play that one too. They sang Boundless Love during communion, which I thought was appropriate. It describes our relationship with God as much as that between two lovers. Quote, "Surround me with your boundless love. Confound me with your boundless love. I was drowning in a sea as lost as I could be when you found me with your boundless love," end quote. St. Peter's inspired St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Fayette, Alabama. This Saturday, they're hosting a Christmas communion service featuring the music of John Prine. I love it. Their pastor and a clip from the St. Peter's video will join me a little bit later in the broadcast. I'm Dwight A. Moody in the Meeting House. I'll be back in just a minute with Mark Wingfield and the news of 2022. With me in the Meeting House today is noted journalist and editor Mark Wingfield of the Baptist News Global. Welcome back to the Meeting House, Mark.
Thank you, Dwight.
We did this last year, got together in December and talked about the top news stories for the whole year. We're going to do that again. I've got my list right here. You've got your list. So tell me, of all the stories, religion in American life, what's number one?
So I'm going to be speaking today out of the top stories, the most read stories on our website.
The most read stories on your website, Baptist
Most read
News.
stories, which may or may not be what I think is the most important, but ironically, I am the author of the most read story on our site this year. So I didn't set this up. I just want you to know. But I think this also indicates how the dialogue has shifted across these 12 months. The most read story on our site was an opinion piece I wrote early in the year. The title was, "It's Time to Stop the Insanity That is Killing Public Education." And it was an opinion piece about the attacks on school boards and teachers and superintendents all over things like alleged critical race theory and how we teach American history and sexuality and gender and all these things that were going on everywhere. That is certainly still an issue. It's very much there. It is not at the forefront of the news the way it was in the first part of the year, but it's still very much an issue. But that was by far our most read story of 2022.
Isn't that interesting? Because this was an election year for senators, like in Georgia where I voted, and of course all over the country people were electing school boards, and of course this is where a lot of this played out. We're going to see more of that, I am sure, as the political divide in America continues. Now, the story I want to highlight has to be the top story of the year, and that is the Supreme Court decision about abortion. Overturning Roe v. Wade. This was in June, although the story was leaked months earlier, a mystery that's kind of faded from public view. I don't think they've ever reported on their investigation, have they, Mark?
Well, they haven't gotten to the bottom of it, and there's just all sorts of interesting stuff going on this. There was a report even this week. There was testimony about this in Congress, I believe, this investigation they're doing, and it's increasingly looking like this might have been a leak from the right, not from the left.
It's going to be very interesting when we find that, but certainly because the effort to overturn Roe v. Wade has been a long-running, intense, ground-level, top-level campaign by a certain segment of the American population, driven by religious organizations, religious rhetoric, religious ideas. It has dominated a great deal, not only of the Supreme Court, but also of politics, as we found out in Kansas and then in the elections this fall.
Right. So that I think you're about to see, as we go through this, our list. And for those listening, we've not collaborated on this at all. We don't know what the other one's going to say
Right.
on this. But you're about to see, I think, a theme emerge.
Okay.
And that theme is evangelical Christian privilege, which shows up in both of those stories. Our number 2 most read story of the year is a story about what I call Christians singing on an airplane. This was a story earlier in the year, you may remember it.
I do.
About these young, enthusiastic evangelical Christians who had been on a mission trip somewhere, and there was a whole bunch of them on an airplane, and one of their young leaders had his guitar on the plane, and during the flight, got up and started leading them in songs as if the whole plane were a church service, right? Yeah. And some people thought this was just the greatest thing ever, that you had Christians singing on an airplane. But other people were annoyed by it, and those who favored it just couldn't understand why anyone wouldn't want that. But you got to ask, okay, what if it had been Muslims singing on a plane? What if it had been Hindus singing on a plane? What if it had been anyone, but evangelical Christians? Would you have felt so good about it? And that just encapsulates the debate we're in these days, trying to get the majority, what was once the majority population, to understand what it feels like to be the minority.
Well, we all love flash mobs, right?
Right.
I like to watch the videos of flash mobs. I don't care what kind of music, instrumental or vocal, that they're singing. And I have been on airplanes when people started to sing, especially coming back to America from overseas. People will strike up a patriotic song or something, glad to be home. We were overseas for a whole year and then coming back. So you can understand how people get very emotional about coming back to the United States. But it's that layer of evangelical privilege, as you called it, that makes that story, that made the event a little irritant to people. There is no question about that. Well, my second story is a continuation of that, and that is Christian nationalism.
Yes.
2 years ago, this wasn't even a phrase in public discourse that I can recall, but now it is everywhere. I'm sure you've written about Christian nationalism this year.
Just a little.
Just a little. I've read a great deal of what you've written about Christian nationalism. Did any of those stories make it to the top of your list?
Well, here's the thing. There's been so many stories about Christian nationalism that no single one of them has risen to the top the way other things have, because it's so insidious and it's everywhere we are, and we're writing about it every week. So that's interesting. Now, there is a connection, though, to our number 3 story of the year,
okay,
which is about it's an analysis piece written by one of our sharp writers about how Putin's invasion of Ukraine is not about the end times and the rapture. Because, when that started, some of these rapture watcher people were just sounding the alarm that this is a sign of the end times. Well, for them, everything's a sign of the end times, right? And Rod Kennedy wrote this lovely piece where he explained why this is not that. It doesn't even measure up to that, right? But it's this filter of seeing all these world events through this dispensationalist lens, and there's a lot of interest in that.
I want to explain for some of our hearers what the rapture is.
Okay, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. It is this idea that one day Jesus is going to return, surprise everybody, swoop down, and gather up what they say all true Christians and carry them off to heaven. There are paintings that illustrate this, and of course there's a whole series of books made famous and made a lot of people a lot of money about this whole end of the world scenario. And of course, what you're saying is that the invasion of Ukraine is not connected to the rapture.
Right.
As
That's
any
what we
of
tried
us
to
would,
say.
we wouldn't think that way anyway. But there's certainly this idea of international political military events being connected with the end of the world, because the New Testament talks about the Battle of Armageddon, invoking one of the places in Israel.
Right.
So, but another story that I want to bring up here is Ukraine, but not from the
Yes.
evangelical rapture side of things, but from the Orthodox side of things. I think
Right.
I certainly have talked more about Russian Orthodoxy, American Orthodoxy, Greek Orthodoxy this year than all the rest of my life put together. And I suspect you've done the same.
Right.
Have you written about Orthodoxy this year?
Oh yeah, and especially the patriarch, the Russian patriarch,
Yeah.
with
Kirill?
his crazy comments trying to defend the war. I think we got to back up and say, over time, one of the great stories of this year is going to be the naked aggression of Vladimir Putin, and the way this is tried to be wrapped in religious cloth is heretical, in a word.
Well, of course, Time magazine this week announced that their man of the year is President Zelensky of Ukraine,
Yes.
himself a Jew, I think a secular Jew. But certainly, we've had more conversation about Russian Orthodoxy, that is the Orthodox Church in Russia, the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and how they're on opposite sides of this. And just last week, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, well, in Ukraine, there are two Orthodox churches, aren't there? There
Right.
is one that's loyal to Moscow and Russia, and one that's loyal to Kyiv and Ukraine, and they've been at odds. And this has been in the news all year. And I did a show on it with Nicholas, what is his name? Denishenko, which is a very common Ukrainian word. He teaches at Valparaiso University, teaches philosophy there, and we did a show with him about all of this. And that, of course, has brought to the fore in America a great deal more conversation about what in the world is orthodoxy. Americans know less about that than they do about the rapture.
Maybe we need some movies.
We do need some movies. We're going to come back in just a minute and pick up our conversation with Mark. But I'm Dwight Moody with Mark Wingfield in the Meeting House. We're discussing the top stories in religion during this past year, 2022. We're going to take a short break to introduce to you the church where Michael and I serve. Michael is the music director, and I'm the pastor at Providence Baptist Church, and we're going to show you a little about it. Well, I'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you, Michael Sebastian, here in the studio with me at the piano. I have a guest, Mark Wingfield. He's a noted journalist of religion and American life, based in Dallas, Texas. And we've been talking about the top religion stories of 2022. Mark, we've left out some really big stories we haven't even got to yet. Let's start
I
with,
know.
What do you want to talk about? What's another big story of the year?
Well, so I'm just going down our list.
Okay.
And the variety is fascinating.
Okay.
And my list is not going to get us to all the things we need to talk about, but this one gets at something. Our number 4 most read story of the year is about an event that happened at Bob Jones University. And you may remember reading about this. There was a student in their fashion design program who came up with a culminating project that showed interpreted biblical characters of creation, significant biblical characters in these particular fashion designs. And it included portraying the Jesus figure in a smock coat of some sort that the critics thought was too feminine, right? And this set off a firestorm that to this day is threatening the presidency at Bob Jones University because of the way, I mean, it is, you couldn't make this stuff up, right? But the reason this story is significant is it goes to the intense battle that is being waged more openly than ever before, in my lifetime at least, about clamping down on gender roles and male dominance. And this is all about the far, far right needing to have male dominance. And the complaint against this fashion design, this is a student project, was that it defied the created order. Well, there's code language for you.
You know, that's just down the street from where we are right this very minute.
Oh, that's right.
Our studio, we're just a few miles from Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina. So yes, it's been a story around here, and it reminds me of a story in Taylor, Texas, last week about their Christmas parade. They had to have 2 parades. Last year they had a Christmas parade down Main Street, sponsored by the local government. They had to allow everybody in the parade, including a float of 2 drag queens.
Oh, yeah.
So they had to, of course, this irritated ministers and churches in the area, and they worked during the year to try to resolve it. The state, really, when they run a parade, cannot deny the presence of a float like that. The church people decided they didn't want to be part of it. So there were 2 parades. The church people had their parade without any drag queens. There was a moment, and then there was the next parade with the drag queens and all the other floats. And you know, the people lined the street, same people, same day, same street, same time, watched 2 parades go by.
Wow. Fascinating.
Part of that cultural struggle over sexuality, Christian presence, Christian privilege, the merging of the secular and the sacred. It's not easy to know how to do that sometimes. Well, I'm going to introduce my story. The United Methodist Church.
Oh, sure.
I know you write for a Baptist kind of affiliated outfit.
Well, we do a lot of Methodist news, yes.
Yeah. But of course, the Methodist Church, on May the 1st of this past year, the new conservative version of what it means to be Methodist, the Global Methodist Church, was formally launched. And since then, churches all over, not only in North Carolina, South Carolina, where we are, but just this past week, 400 churches in Texas left the United Methodist Church to join the Global Methodist Church.
Huge story.
It's a huge story.
I think from an American religion, that will certainly be in the top 3.
It will be
on any list that gets made this year.
It will be. Now, what's another one on your list?
So another one on my list, our fifth most read story, is about a particular person, but this person's emblematic of a bigger issue. This is a story about a guy named Vodi Bakum.
Oh, yeah. I
who
read his book.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
I read his book and reviewed it for the Meeting House.
Yeah, so Vodi Bakum is a Baptist. He is a theologian who's working in a seminary in Africa. But still, he's not. He was a Southern Baptist in Houston, but now he's not. His church isn't Southern Baptist. But some of the Theo Bros in the Southern Baptist Convention wanted to run him for SBC president. Well, there's a little problem because you got to be a member of an SBC church in order to be elected president of the Southern Baptist Convention. And so that foiled their plan. So they ran him for president of the SBC Pastors Conference, and that didn't work out either. But the reason this matters is he is a male-dominant, strong disciplinarian, far right, just about as extreme as you can get. But he represents this far-right group that is trying to take over the Southern Baptist Convention again. But more to the right.
Yeah.
And so far it's not working, but these people are still there and they are really very present. And he is emblematic of that as well.
Well, of course, you and I remember the first time a conservative group tried successfully to take over the Southern Baptist Convention.
Right.
Started when I was a student at a Baptist seminary. But you've put your finger on another one of my top stories, and that is the continuing turmoil in the Southern Baptist Convention. Not only from the right wing, but a much bigger issue, I think, is the way they have mishandled the sexual abuse charges, episodes over many decades, not treating them well, not really punishing ministers who were involved in this. And of course, it came up at the Southern Baptist Convention this year with, was the Guidepost consulting firm that did this big study. And now there's investigations, and it's boiling in the Southern Baptist Convention, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Vodi Bakum represents a group of far right people in the SBC who deny there's even a problem.
Right.
So the whole thing is related. But you're right, that's got to be in the top 3 or 4 stories of the year for anybody who's talking about religion in America. It's way up there.
Yeah. Now, give us the next story you've got.
So our next story, the number 6 most read story on our site, is a story that we published, I believe, 2 years ago. And it's an evergreen that is always every month within the top 5 or 10 on our list of most read articles. And it's a piece written by a guy named Ed Oxford, who lives in California, I believe. And Ed is part of a duo that's been researching the origins of the word homosexual in the RSV version of the Bible. And there's a new documentary that's just coming out about this called 1946. Ed and a woman named Kathy Baldock are writing a book that should be out within the next few months, I hope, within the next year, on the same topic. And Ed's piece for us was my quest to find the word homosexual in the Bible. And there is such an appetite for this information because the reality is in 1946, the word homosexual for the first time ever was inserted by a group of translators into an English translation of the Bible. And there is much disagreement over what the words actually mean in Greek that are translated in Romans chapter 1. And that's what this piece is about. So this is, again, going to one of the big issues of our time, trying to come to a reconciliation of Orthodox Christianity and inclusion of LGBTQ persons.
Well, of course, the LGBTQ conversation, if we can politely call it that, has dominated a lot of Christian rhetoric and dialogue over the last decade, certainly, and already figures into several of the stories we've talked about, including the United Methodist Church,
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and so it's going to continue to be at the forefront of the news in the coming year. We've spent a little time talking about 2022. You want to give us a forecast of what's coming down the pike in 23?
Well, so just a few quick hits. I actually
Okay.
recorded a webinar yesterday on this very subject
Okay, good.
with some others through this Center for Healthy Churches. Um, so one of the big things I think church-wise, this is sort of inside baseball, but I think in this post-pandemic phase we're entering, whatever it is now, I think the next church internal reckoning is going to be with church staff who are no longer suited to be flexible enough to do the jobs they need to do the way they need to be done, because the whole way you play the game has changed.
Well, we
And
certainly
yeah,
we certainly learned this, all of us as pastors, during the pandemic, where we had to become video producers, something we were
right,
never trained with.
right. But there's just so many ways that if you've been doing the same thing every year for 20 years, 1 year experience 20 times, you're not going to cut it anymore. And we've got to have a lot of flexibility on this. So I think that's a big issue. That certainly the continued reckoning on truth. Shameless plug here. I have a new book coming out in January. That's titled Honestly, and it's a biblical understanding of truth in a post-Trump age.
This
And
is
it's
your
a
book.
survey.
Your
It's
book.
my book coming out with Fortress. Yes.
Well,
So I plugged that for January, right?
well,
But
you'll have
I
to.
think the continued battle for truth is just always going to be with us.
You send me a copy of it. I'll review it
I
and
will.
publish my review in the meeting house.
You got it.
Mark, it's great to see you again. Thank you for talking with me through this past year. We'll have to do it again next year.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Blessings on you for the new year, and Merry Christmas and
Thanks, and
all
to
of
you.
that.
All right.
I'll see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to Mark Wingfield, the publisher, editor, and lead writer at the Baptist News Global. It's been a terrific and stimulating conversation. We're going to do it again next year as we did last year. I'll be back in just a minute with what I call Prine Time in the Meeting House. I welcome to the Meeting House today the Reverend Danny Whitehead of St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Fayette, Alabama. He's planning and leading an Advent Communion service featuring the music of John Prine. So this is what we call Prine Time in the Meeting House. Danny, welcome to the Meeting House.
Thank you, Dwight. Good
Am
to be
I
here.
right? Fayette, Alabama is up in the northwest part of Alabama, right?
That is correct, and you said it correctly also. It's Fayette. It's one
Fayette.
syllable.
It's one syllable. Fayette, because I lived for a long time in Fayette County, Kentucky, which is Lexington, Kentucky. But you're the pastor of the Episcopal Church there,
Correct.
and you're going to host tomorrow this service featuring the music of John Prine. Tell me where you got this idea.
Well, some friends of mine told me that St. Peter's by the Sea Episcopal Church in Gulfport, Mississippi had done a John Prine Mass. So I went online and checked that out. And I talked with some of my folks here, some of my parishioners, some of my friends in the area, and they were very excited about doing something similar here at St. Mike's. So that's how it came about. And also, we're friends with a folk singer and artist, A. Partridge. And so we asked him if, and he's a big fan of John Prine. So we asked him to do the music for us.
Now, I'm going to talk about Abe in just a minute, but are you a John Prine fan?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes.
When did you get converted to Prine
Oh,
Time?
gosh. Well, since I was a teenager,
Really?
all my adult life. Yes. Right. Yeah. His early song,
Well, I have to confess, Danny, that I had never heard of John Prine until 2 months after he died.
Wow.
And a friend of mine posted something on Facebook, and it was that memorial video that they put together right after he died. He put it up on Facebook. I watched it. I'd never heard of the man. I got converted, baptized, and sanctified there that first night.
Well, great. I'm not surprised. I'm just surprised you hadn't heard from him sooner.
I hadn't heard from him sooner. Now, I went over to Nashville a couple of months ago in October for the John Prine week. Did you go to that?
No, I did not. I actually didn't hear about it until it was over, but I would have if I had known.
People all over the country came to Ryman Auditorium. I got to attend 2 of the concerts in Ryman Auditorium, which of course was just fabulous. Now tell me about your service tomorrow. Is the John Prine music going to be the only music in your service?
Yes. We're going to do 6 songs.
Which 6 are you going to sing? Tell me.
All right. We're going to start with Angel from Montgomery.
Right.
Then we're going to do Paradise.
Right.
Then we're going to do Fish and Whistle.
Oh, great. I like that song.
Right. God Only Knows. Boundless Love. And then we're going to close with Hello in there. That's
great. As you know, I quoted the lyrics to Boundless Love just a few minutes ago. So you're going to have the complete Episcopal liturgy.
Well, I'm going to actually use a form of the New Zealand prayer book, Holy Communion service. We're going to cover all the main areas that are required for an Episcopal Eucharist, but it's going to be kind of abbreviated so that we can focus more on the music.
And this is out of what you said was the New Zealand prayer book. I'm not familiar with this. Tell me about it.
Well, it's the prayer book that's used in New Zealand, and actually it's, I guess you would word bilingual. It's on one side of the page is Maui and the other side is English. It's the Anglican Church in New England is definitely the most incorporating indigenous Anglicans better than any other part of the Anglican Communion.
And so even though the order of a service might be very similar, the language is different. That is, it reads different.
Right, parts of it. And it's actually more modern version. Our prayer book goes back to the 1979. So the language is more contemporary, and also they incorporate more of a creation focus, environmental focus.
Okay. Now, for this service, this is 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. You don't normally have a service on Saturday at 1 o'clock, do you?
No, this is a special service. On Sunday morning, we'll do Advent 3, just like we always do. So that's why we're doing it somewhat differently, and that's okay. On Sunday, we do more of a traditional worship experience.
Now, how many people would normally come to your Sunday service on Advent 3?
Oh, gosh. We've done a little better lately. 30, 35.
Okay. That's almost twice as many as come to my church. So, so how many do you expect at your John Prine service tomorrow?
God only knows.
To quote John Prine on there.
Yes, right. I don't know. I hope we have a good turnout. We've advertised throughout the diocese, and some places like Abe has come to Columbus, Mississippi, which is nearby. And so we did some advertising down there. Some folks from my former church in Florence, Alabama are definitely coming down. So we'll just have to see. I hope we have a great turnout.
Now, you have a guest musician, Abe. Tell us about Abe.
Okay, Abe, wow, interesting character. Like I said, he's a folk singer. He actually, you share this in common, Dwight. He was a Baptist preacher in Kentucky as a young man, independent Baptist preacher.
Really?
And he went up there, and then I'll have to let him tell. Hopefully you're going to get him on your show.
I hope so. I've already written him to ask if I can schedule him in January.
Right. Well, he's very interested and also, is it okay if I talk a little bit about what he's been going around doing?
Sure.
Yeah, he's been going around Appalachia to servant handling churches and recording their music.
Yes.
And been doing podcasts. And he's really honoring those folks. A lot of us, you know, have probably not given them respect that they deserved in the past. And as Christians, as the body of Christ, I think he's managed to expand our horizons on that. Not that I would go to one of those churches and handle snakes, but still, I think what he's doing is really good. He's a great musician. He does a lot of mostly he does original stuff, but we asked him to do the John Prine, and he's been working on that for several months to prepare for this service. So normally when he is in concert or does performances, he only does his original stuff. So
now,
this is
he's going to sing. Are the people going to sing with him?
If they want to join, they can, but that's not the focus of it. We're not going to have the lyrics printed out. The whole idea is to listen and absorb the experience.
Because, as you know, at the St. Peter's by the Sea down in Gulfport, Mississippi, the video that you watched and that I also watched that we're going to play in just a minute, they distributed the lyrics to everybody and they all sang along.
Right.
Yeah,
correct.
we're gonna play. I want to play right now a video of the worships at the end, the last song, Please Don't Bury Me Down in the Cold, Cold Ground, which was the final song that they sang at St. Peter's. Danny, I want to thank you for coming into the Meeting House. I'm going to be very interested in how your people react to this special John Prine service tomorrow, how many people show up, and what kind of enthusiasm they have. I'll be back in touch with you about this. But thank you for coming by the Meeting House today.
Thank you for having me, Dwight.
Now we're going to play from St. Peter's by the Sea Episcopal Church in Mississippi, the closing number of their John Prine Mass.
Woke up this morning, it's in time, and oh, what a feeling when my soul is deep, and on heaven I did rise. When I got there, they didn't say that happened this way. Jesus, all glory in your head.
was a community band playing the song of John Prine, "Please Don't Bury Me Down in the Cold, Cold Ground." That's St. Peter's Episcopal Church by the Sea down in Mississippi. Thank you for coming by the Meeting House today. I'm Dwight A. Moody, your host. Thanks to Michael Sebastian for being in the Meeting House today.
Thank you.
It's been great working with you. I guess I'll see you in a couple of days in church, right? Thanks to Mark Wingfield in Dallas and Danny Whitehead in Fayette, Alabama. You can visit our site at themeetinghouse.net, subscribe to the newsletter, ask us a question, make a contribution, send me a suggestion. Visit our YouTube site at youtube.com. Subscribe to our broadcast videos. It's been a good time in the Meeting House today. God bless all of you. See you next week for another conversation on religion and American life.